shut up for 2 minutes and don't worry about it.
Is it the same?
Hey everyone, Kyle from Hilton here, and we have another beer tasting coming up Wednesday, March the 9th at 6 o'clock. This is beer tasting number 91 for us. We're closing in on that big 100, and we have a brand new brewery to show you. This is Container Brewing out of Vancouver, and I think you're really going to like the styles because we finally have an Irish Red to show you. Now, the artwork on these is absolutely fantastic, as you can see, but this is a brewery that we've really been wanting to do for a while, and their beer's been selling out very quickly. We have a German Pils, we have their Wayward West Coast style pale, and their Juggernaut Nitro Imperial Stout. So that's going to have that lovely kind of creamy mouthfeel, that thick nitro head, but yeah, an Irish Red. We are going to be joined by Mike Maxwell of Nectar Imports, who is the agent for this brewery. You know, I'm hoping this is going to be like the Category 12 we did a few months back, where we just lost our minds about how we'd never tasted Category 12, and the beers were just absolutely incredible. So, all that and more coming up Wednesday, March 9th, 6 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Media Boutique.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Welcome to a very special Andrew Hilton beer tasting without Aaron, who thoughtlessly and rudely went and got himself sick with COVID. So now we're running with us and Sky. And you know what? Sky's going to do a triple A plus job, and we're just going to power through, and it's going to be great. Our topic tonight is Hoyne Brewing, as incredibly popularized by Craig and Eric a couple of 3 weeks back. And we're going to taste the rest of the lineup that does not include Dark Matter or Appleton. I'm joined once again by Grant Flegg of Copper and Theory. Hello, Grant.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good. It's always a pleasure to be joining you here.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be an adventure. Well, we'll see how it goes. Now we have 4 beers in front of us. Thanks for the really snappy comeback, Grant. Always a pleasure working with you. We have 4 beers in front of us. Our tasting order is going to be the Hoyne Pilsner, the Vienna, the Easy Down Pale, and then finish with the IPA. Let's jump into the Pilsner, and why don't you tell us a little bit about a Hoyne, because there's a lot of Canadian brewing here. Like, we can talk about Swans, we can talk about the fact that they're like 11 years old. Like, Hoyne's been around a little bit.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. So Hoyne was started by Sean Hoyne 11 years ago now. I think it is, or they're in their 11th year. In fact, they've just released their 10 Good Reasons anniversary beer. I'm not sure if you can see this at all there.
Yeah, we can see it just fine.
Yeah, Hellas Bock that they released. And so Sean Hoyne has been around in the Canadian brewing industry for decades at this point, and his approach to beer making is very much about making the cleanest, the most well-executed styles, generally without like fussy or complications. Like, it's just straightforward, clean, amazing beers. And so, he started, as you mentioned, doing Swans back in the 80s, being trained by Frank Appleton, who is who the namesake of the ESB is after.
And let's dial that back a little bit. Like, this is OG Canadian microbrewing history. Like, Swans, I don't know if they're the very first, but they're one of the first 3. Like, they predate Unibrew.
Yeah. It's he's been around for a minute, and I really do respect that in this field of kind of ever weirdening beers, that we do have someone like Sean Hoyne who just wants to make, you know what, this is going to be a great Pilsner. This is going to be a great dark matter because they refuse to say a style. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be their lactobacillus huckleberry pilsner. It's just a pilsner.
Indeed. No. Yeah. Yeah. I think they do one sour beer around the year, or maybe one. But regardless, we don't see that here. And yeah, I think the weirdest that I've ever seen them get was the espresso stout. That's pretty
A
much the
coffee
one
and a
adjunct they'll
stout
allow
together?
themselves.
Good heavens. Tell us about this pilsner. Like, it's very classic, it's very clean, it's got those lovely kind of cheesy, spicy Eastern European hops. I mean,
Yep, yep.
there's
Wherever
almost a
possible, particularly with this one being one thing that Sean loves to do with his beers is be very authentic with them. And so even with this one, you see, all of the hops and all of the malts, or majority of them at the very least, coming from European suppliers, so that you are getting that authentic mouthfeel and that authentic experience out of beer. And so
Now, how
just
did you get looped in with Hoyne? So, I mean, we know kind of who they are. They started in 2011. They came out of Swans. They're very traditionalist is not really the word I'm looking for, but it's the one that comes first to mind. They're certainly very traditional in their way. How did you
Mhm.
get looped in? What's your history with Hoyne? How did you discover them?
Well, that's an excellent question. At one point, I think it was we've been working with them for, I want to say, 3 years now. Let's say maybe 3 years, um, and they had other representation in the province before us, and weren't quite seeing the result that they wanted. And so, just in the search of a different agent came to us. And we have our successes with Yellow Dog and Field House and other suppliers, and so we're very, very happy to bring someone like Hoyne onto the lineup, especially as an excellent contrasting point to someone like Strathcona, for example, who does love doing the adjunct heavy beers.
Well, we don't have any adjuncts tonight. Everything here is pretty much, very
Yeah,
15,
4-4.
16 purity law in favor.
Mm-hmm. And I personally just have such a great experience with these beers, with Pilsner in particular. Flying out to the island, and you can find this, at just about any pub that you visit on the island. One thing that you see out there more than you see here is pictures of craft beer.
I
And
was having that conversation with
mhm.
someone the other day. We were kind of sitting in a restaurant. It was like we were actually sitting at the Duke on the west side. And we were like, they offer all their craft beers in pitchers. I was like, I can't remember the last time I ordered a pitcher of beer anywhere, and it used to be such a thing. I can't remember the last time I had a pitcher. I almost kind of miss it. I mean, granted, we've been, all drinking alone with COVID and developing horrible, horrible habits, but I can't remember the last time I had a pitcher with someone. Now I want to have a pitcher with someone just because it's been so long.
Well, absolutely. And so, yeah, this is where one of those fond memories comes from for me, is that it was we'd flown out for the weekend or whatever it was, and we found ourselves at some oyster bar on the coast, and they had pitchers of Pilsner and dark matter. And so then it was just, good friends, good conversation, and the pitcher of Hoyne to be shared amongst us.
Uh, Yeah, Chris and Tyler are kind of chiming in on this. Why isn't craft beer pitchers a thing anymore? I think it's twofold. One, pitchers have been a slow seller here in Alberta for quite a while. Even bars that did kind of pitcher features, they were never a very big hit for most places. There were certainly some exceptions where some bars did quite well with them. Hey, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
one of our newest suppliers, Mariner,
yeah,
actually sent us pictures of their brand, because
that's
we're pouring
sweet.
at a couple locations in Calgary. But
Oh,
I
I
was just
kind of
so
want one of
amazed,
those now.
right?
The other reason I was going to say, more than the fact that pitchers haven't been really a big thing for a while, is that's not really the craft beer bar ethos. It's not you're going to have 5 pints of the same thing. You're going to have 1 pint of 3 or 4 different things.
Absolutely.
Um, I know I'm certainly guilty of that. Like when I walk into a new beer bar, the first thing I usually order is like the big flight of literally everything on tap. And then I'll generally stick to the IPA end of the menu. But if they have more than one, I doubt I'll have the same beer twice. I think
Yeah.
the idea of pitchers is maybe, hopefully, something that we'll see as craft beer becomes more and more normalized, where you'll just walk into a bar and be like, I'll have a pitcher of Superset or a pitcher of Hoyne IPA, or
Yeah, or
in the
like
greatest of all universes, the
yes.
Appleton. But of course, we can't get Appleton like we want because some people won't keep the 4 packs of cans in stock.
I'll put the request in. But yeah, no, I very much agree with you. We don't really see the pictures of craft beer very much around because of that mentality, that culture of trying the new, the next thing, and always moving on to the newest. I think that right now we're in a great spot where more independent small breweries are creating excellent lagers and these great flagship beers, and as the market kind of stabilizes around those, it's very possible that we could see interest in pitchers into independent brewing.
Yeah, everybody's saying, well, maybe a pitcher would be $40. Well, I actually do see the prices on what Molson and Labatt charge, and I see the prices that like smaller breweries charge, and it's really not that different. I mean, I think that a 50 liter of super saturation or night gallery is about what a 59 of Coors Light or Canadian are. Like they're within $10 of each other. It's
Wow.
really not that different in terms of cost, other than the fact you're getting 9 less liters. But that's only like a 10% increase in terms of price. Like it shouldn't be a $40 pitcher. It should be, probably $26 for a pitcher is pretty fair. But that's not crazy. I
Yeah.
think that the big breweries are charging enough that it's quite easy to make very good beer at a lower price.
Now, I think the other part of that as well is that many restaurant owners find, or sorry, many restaurant managers find themselves to be very price conscious, and
Hmm.
so also on the back end of that, behind just the price, whether it's open or whether it's not, there are inducements going on from many suppliers to many restaurants.
There is so much, we've talked about it before on this channel. There is so much dirty money floating around. We talked about tied houses and how tied house legislation here has become very hollow. Yeah, it's a very dirty business right now. And the inducements thing, I mean, they straight up tried to legalize it last year and just be like, yeah, I can give you a car to list Molson all year. That's not a problem. That's not a conflict of interest. Um, no, they tried to push that through and it didn't work. But yeah, there's still a lot of dirty money whether it's legalized or not. So let's get away from a bad topic and move on to a better one. Vienna's. Now this is, me, I'm an IPA head, but like this Vienna, man, me and this beer can be best of friends. Uh, Without doing all four side by side before, this is already my front runner for being my favorite tonight. I absolutely love this beer. I love the color. I love the crackery, like Ritz cracker caramel character to it. God, what a beautiful, beautiful beer. And I like Viennas. I always have.
You're part of a rapidly growing segment of beer consumers that enjoys the Multiboy.
Mm. Yeah, that's just perfect. Exactly what I wanted right this minute.
It's as we were talking about a moment ago, the craft consumer does tend to overlook a lot of flagship offerings from breweries in favor of, the new, the hype, the chase beers, the whales. Um, but you see a lot for a lot of these beers that do make it and become these huge, popular kind of phenoms in their market. Do tend to kind of skew towards something like this, where it is generally kind of moderate alcohol and a little bit of a malt character towards it, not overt in the hops in any way. So this is exactly the kind of beer like the Blue Bucks and the Fat Tires and the
Yeah,
Dead
Fat
Guy.
Tire is the one that kind of came to my mind when you were making that case. Fat Tire really does. That tends to be the one I would think of in that range of being kind of an amber ale or amber lager that it kind of ticks all those malty boxes. I'll also say this is a lot better than Fat Tire.
That's That's some shade across the bow, I think.
Well, I mean, it's been a while since I've had a fat tire. I used to drink a lot of fat tire, I'll be honest. Like, we couldn't get it here and it had the cachet of only being in the US, I'd go down and I'd get, like, some Mothership Wit, and I'd get some New Belgium Ranger, and I'd get the very finest beer selection you could buy in Shelby, Montana, at the Try and Save grocery store, whatever the little shitty grocery store there is, which actually had a decent beer department. But I'd come back with it, and I can remember drinking a lot of Ranger and thinking it was like the biggest deal when Ranger started coming in cans. And I loved Fat Tire, and now that we can get it here and like it's on the shelf all the time, I genuinely can't remember the last time I had one. Maybe it's because it comes through BDL, and that just leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth, independent of the beer itself.
It does seem to fly in the face of kind of the core values of number one, New Belgium itself, but then also craft beer consumers. You know, if that stigma were known about what BDL is, who owns it, and what being distributed by them means.
Yes, and what it takes to get listed in the beer store in Ontario if you're not owned by Molson or Labatt's. It's a really dirty business.
Yep. Well, that's why a lot of Ontario breweries are, I wouldn't quite say forced to, but have little choice but to sell a lot of their stuff on their online stores or right out of their taproom doors. We don't have quite the same access to resources. Sorry, they don't have quite the same access to resources like we do in Alberta, where, you know, any brewery could just send their stuff up to St. Albert and have it distributed province wide. They have to fight for that space in the LCBO and the beer store.
I think there's also a different fight with Connect where you're spoiled for choice. If I just go to the, you know, I just want to look at beer, I just want to look at Alberta made, I just want to go in stock. Oh, 11,000 SKUs found. It's like, okay. It's very easy to get lost in that listing. It's not as simple as just putting something in Connect and hoping or waiting for people to buy it, because we are very spoiled for choice. And unless you're someone like, let's just say, Cabin Brewing, because everything that they put on Instagram sells out instantly, you're kind of really, really buried on those Connect listings, because if you're not advertising, someone else is advertising, and they're going to be down here tasting me on it or wanting to help me get it on tap on the growler station or whatever. Like, it's not as simple as just putting it on and Connect at all. It's a very aggressive business. Actually,
Yeah.
you'd be better to speak to that than I would. I mean, how many times do you get listings that are just completely out of the blue in a store you've never visited, and they're just all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of Hoyne listings? I bet it's quite rare.
That was actually the case. I had before we brought on Hoyne into the portfolio, I had a real. I said out loud to my partner, I said, you know what? I just, given the nature of our portfolio and the beers we bring in, I fully expect that we are just never going to get a listing in, you know, Frank, Alberta. Was specifically what I said, and then
Yeah, but Frank Slide Liquor rules.
well, then as soon as we brought on Hoyne, I saw that Dark Matter was going to Frank Slide Liquor, and I was like,
It's
well,
a
God,
great store. It's an
I'm not
amazing store.
I'm not here to disparage their name in any way. They were more of an example of a town that you wouldn't expect the beer to be in,
No,
especially
that's
back
fair.
at that time when we had you know, Upright Brewing and Ninkasi and Breakside and Cascade and all these other like really weird beers. Uh,
I love
that's
going to Upright though. I need to go back to Upright.
oh, it's such a good time.
I like that's the one in the basement of the office building, and you just, yeah, that's a great time.
We were recommended as they did recently renovate and apparently actually solidify what their hours are.
Oh wow, it's not just
Yeah,
if you show up and the elevator's turned off, you don't get in.
yeah. But we were recommended when we were down in Portland that if you want to kind of have the experience of the Upright tasting room without actually going to that location, there's this great restaurant called, I believe it's called the Grain and Gristle, that serves, you know, all of the Upright launches. They have a fantastic tasting menu. It was just a spectacular experience. So if anybody's in Portland, the Grain and Gristle.
Well, I'll be back in Portland sooner or later. Cascade, on the other hand, I was standing there in the tasting room feeling like I didn't have enough money to be there. Cascade's gotten very spendy, and their tasting room feels like it sometimes.
Really? I remember going there. Maybe it was just because of the volume that we had at Cascade that I don't remember it that well.
That's fair.
Maybe. Yeah.
I
But
certainly have brewery visits like that. I think between the half dozen times I've been to Russian River, I can put together about half an hour amount of time that I've been there.
That being said, later that day we did go to Gigantic Brewing, and we spent, I want to say, 3 hours there, and it felt like a half hour just with how great the atmosphere was, how good the beers were.
That's a really great spot. So questions coming in. Do we have Craig or Eric to thank for the Hoyne tasting? You have both of them to thank. I knew we were going to do Appleton with those folks. And yes, that was absolutely the impetus for this, was just how well received not only the tasting was, but also those two beers in particular. Yes, that's why we're doing Hoyne again, because we had to. It's too good not to. Crispy apple, Breakside. Chris, do you know what the Zen and the Art of Building a Staircase is in reference to? I assume that's off one of the cans. Yeah, I'm not sure. Apparently it's by Brian Evans. Not sure what that's about. It's on the Vienna can.
Hmm. It's interesting. This is just curious to me. So it says, at the top that it's an excerpt from Zen and the Art of Building a Staircase by Brian Evans, and then at the bottom of it, it says Sean Hoyne Brewmaster, as though to reattribute the quote.
Back to Sean Hoyne. All
I
right,
think
sure.
they all have that moment of having like a signature line at the bottom, but contextually that seems
Odd.
Yep, that's the one.
Ericus, it's gone perfectly smoothly. Whatever variable caused all the trouble before must not be present tonight. Yes, I agree. Aaron is not here. That's true. Everything being seamless. There's no weird audio glitches. The camera's not on fire. Nothing smoking coming out of the computer tower. Yes, there's a reason for that, and it's because Aaron isn't here. I'm not saying he's jinxed or cursed, or that, he went into an Egyptian tomb that he shouldn't have at the wrong time. I'm just saying that everything seems fine now. And he should go back to bed with a hot water bottle and stop spying on us, because I know he's watching. Why is this such a great Vienna Lager? I would guess it's got to do with the water treatment at the start more than anything else, because Vienna is so water dependent.
Yeah, and they're very blessed being out there in Victoria. They have a very soft water table, so they kind of have the freedom, rather than in Calgary, where a lot of what we have to do is take the water, strip it down, and then build it back up to the proper profile. They can either start with neutral or just, turn the tap on and then make it what they need it to be. That's a oversimplification, but
of course it is.
It feels that way sometimes.
I will say this is just a delight getting deeper and deeper on this beer.
I would also argue that part of why this is such a good Vienna is just skill. They're trying to treat the beer right, trying to be authentic to the style, and they're not trying to add weird stuff into it. They're just trying to do Vienna Lager from Victoria.
I would also say that it's kind of the perfect time, like the perfect day for Vienna. And I'm not going to go into Devon's weird natural wine app that says this is a flower day or a fruit day or an earth day. But I will actually say, like, down here at least, it's like, it feels like the first day of spring. I don't want a Vienna Lager when it's January 5th and it's minus 35. I don't want a Vienna Lager particularly when it's July 5th and it's plus 35. I want a Vienna lager like either in the dog days of summer into early fall when it's still warm, but the days are getting shorter, and I want something kind of crisp and malty, or even more so, I want it right now. I want it in the, it's not winter anymore, but it's not quite spring. I want something fresh and bright and a little bit sweet. I know I'm just literally describing a Maybach, but it's that same idea. I like this style of beer at this time of year. I think it's just perfect. Um, and I think part of it is just we're getting this on the right day.
That's a strong thought. These beers do tend to, like that more shoulder season kind of area.
Oh, okay. So, question about what does Vienna style typically consist of? I'll let you take this one, mostly because I
Uh,
don't want to.
oh gosh, it's been too long since I've got into the whole BJCP of it all.
Oh, I know.
Uh,
It's the same for me, and I didn't do that research up front because I assumed I'd have a guest that would answer that question. That's
yeah,
why I
just
just immediately lobbed it over to you.
it becomes difficult as soon as we there are it tends to get conflated a little bit between your Viennas, some of your Helles box, and like the few of these like maltier lager expressions that have a bit of overlap between them. This one typically we're going to be seeing with this. Otherwise, you would call this a Marzen style, and so this is beer for spring, kind of as you were saying there. And exactly what you're getting out of this is correct for the style. We're getting a low moderate hop characteristic. This one's finishing a bit on the drier side. Lots of like biscuity cracker malts, some light caramelization to it, and a very very reasonable like 5-ish% alcohol. It's I hate to just say like this is what a Marzen is or a Vienna is, but it does a great job of just kind of not adulterating that style.
No, I think there's something really to be said for two style, like two style. Um, I learned this when I was doing a lot of my wine education. When we were doing American Chardonnay, they wouldn't drag out like, J-Lore or something. They'd bring out Rombauer. And we were going to do like, Rhone Valley stuff. They wouldn't bring out like Côte de Rhone. They'd bring out like a proper Chardonnay for a proper Côte Rôtie or Hermitage. Because you need good examples to reference to.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say this is kind of a reference Vienna, I'm not saying, oh, well, this is just a good one to put in your beer club. I'm saying, like, this is one that other Viennas, even if they might be from Europe, could refer back to because it's right to style for me. It really does tick all of the boxes for a Vienna. It has low but perceptible hop characteristic. It has that absolutely glorious glowing in the glass color to it. It has, to me, Ritz crackers, bran flakes, this rich cereal characteristic that changes depending on the temperature of the beer, depending on how much air it gets, depending on where you are in the can or in the glass, it changes. That's good Vienna right there.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that one there. It could almost feel like we're disparaging it when we say that it's a very typical example of a Vienna, but that is said with only the most utmost respect when we say that is like this is what it should be.
Yes. All right, well, let's move on and go to Down Easy, which I think the promo I called Easy Down, but we'll just move on from that mistake and
You did,
pretend
but
it
you're reading it
never
back,
happened.
so it's fine.
So Down Easy, very dark for a pale ale, at least in the modern parlance of what a pale ale is.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's gonna make this a fun night.
Yeah, this one I can't remember the exact language that they use to describe it, but somewhere that like a West Coast pale ale. So we are looking, if you think more of the classic West Coast IPA, where it was that maltier body, this is kind of along the same lines where we are not looking for, light body just so that we can taste hops. We are actually looking for something that's balanced, lower alcohol, lower IBUs than a West Coast IPA. But some hop
So our
characteristics.
reference beer here is probably more like Anchor Liberty Ale.
Yeah, that'd probably be a fairly reasonable example. But
Ooh, and
yeah,
I get stinky, stinky Cascade. I brewed with a lot of Cascade hops when I was home brewing, and that just smells like triple C hops. And oh
yeah.
man, it's so dank. Oh, it just smell. Maybe it's just the shape of my glass or my exact can, but that just smells like hops right out of the deep freeze, ready to go in the brew kettle. That's absolutely stunning.
And this I feel as well, where the Vienna tends towards being on the little bit maltier expression of those beers that we were talking, like the Fat Tire. This one leans a little bit more into the hops, but we're kind of still in that nice little bread basket for uh, you know just excellent drinkable malty beers.
It's almost perfumed, like I'm almost getting like rose water or cold cream, which is a very odd thing for me to say about a beer in this style. And the malt backbone's just so it's so generous. Like normally you talk about an IPA, you talk about having like a rigid backbone in the sense that like it has some malt, the malt doesn't go away, or it doesn't. It's a hop showcase.
Mhm.
Here the malt is almost the same level of star as the hops because it's just so giving and there's so much to find.
Yeah, and this is something that I find we are definitely lacking in today's brewing scene. As I kind of mentioned before, a lot of the pale ales and IPAs these days are meant to have a very, very light malt profile to them, so that you can accent the sexy, sexy, and expensive hops.
And they are
So
by
this
far
also,
the most expensive part of the beer. Like
yeah,
per pound, it's just astronomical.
yeah. So coming to something like this, uh, I like to call beers like this just incredibly well balanced. It's well thought out, and that's something that across the line that is typical for Hoyne is that they want to make something that you crack the first one and then you're drinking the rest of the four.
I don't think I'd have a lot of trouble with that with this. No.
Yeah.
So is this a launch beer for them? Is this a relatively new innovation, this beer, or is this something that's been in the portfolio for Hoyne for a very long time?
At the very least, it's been a very long time. I wouldn't know offhand if it was a launch beer for them. I remember well before I was with Copper in Theory, I was visiting BC, and I brought this back with me uh, uh, from my trip to Vancouver. That must have been 8 years ago. So if not a launch beer, it's pretty close to it.
You know, I used to hate this style of pale ale. Like when I was first getting really into IPAs, I was like, oh, that's so old fashioned. No one drinks that anymore. And now as I, get closer and closer to 40, it's like, you know what? I really like this style of pale ale because nobody makes them anymore. And they were really onto something that, 10 years younger than me turned their nose up at and walked away from. It's
I
just
uh,
beautiful.
I find that there's this bit of a bell curve for beer drinkers for where they're for what they're enjoying. And so, at the lowest point, at the first point on the bell curve, generally people get into, your macro loggers and things like that. Easy, accessible. You can find it anywhere, well priced. That's where a lot of people get into it. And, a lot of people that stay there, and that's fine. But then as soon as you start exploring more and more and more, you get kind of weirder and wackier beers and hoppier and sour. And then it comes to this plateau where all you want is like mixed culture, fruited, quadruple dry hopped Grodziski, just the weirdest style that you could think of. Throw all of the words into it. That's the only thing that really excites you. And then I think you come back down this other side when you actually start learning about what makes beer good and uh, um, what balance is and things like that. Uh, and so then you start coming back around to maybe some things that you dismissed when you were at your peak, and then you realize, wow, that beer is actually really, really, really well made. And
I
so
think
yeah, I
that's
think
the biggest lesson that I've learned doing one of these a week for actually happy second pandemic versary, everyone. It's the day before St. Patrick's Day, so it's now officially been 2 years. But no, I think over the last 2 years, I've definitely learned that exact lesson. The one you're just describing. Like, I was very much, if it's not a big IPA, I'm not interested. And now it's like, ooh, there's a new Vienna. I'm so excited. Um, if nothing else, the pandemic has done that for me. So
Yeah.
no. Some people are asking like, what is the Hoyne of Alberta? And they're suggesting maybe far. I'm struggling with like the Hoyne of Alberta. Is anybody doing this? I feel like anyone else who'd maybe started in like 2018, 2019 and
It's
wanted to make beers like this, it'd feel almost a bit inauthentic because Hoyne's been doing this since these beers were in fashion at the time and has just continued to work on them over the last decade. I feel like starting with these styles would feel, I mean, cool. I'd be all on board, but it wouldn't be the same level to a certain
it
point. You know what I mean?
it's difficult to say that only because there are a couple of factors at play. I don't think it's the worst comparison to make for for far. They are trying to do authentic German styles, very well balanced. They don't tend to throw too many wacky and wild things into their beers. They largely are trying to make well balanced classic styles authentically. Um, the difficult part comes in a lot of people who start out doing things like that will quickly kind of be, I don't want to say swayed by the money, but if we look
No,
at
you can say swayed by the money. Everybody wants to make an IPA that sells, 5 pallets a week.
if we look at it, Steel and Oak and Twin Sails notably both opened as German first breweries.
I didn't know that about Twin Sails, actually.
Yeah, they started as wanting to make German style beers. They reached out to Steel and Oak to ask about inspiration, how to do this, that, the other, and trade ideas. If we look on the Alberta side, we can look at Dandy, for instance, who their launch beers were an oyster stout and an English brown ale.
Yeah, they're golden brown. Yeah, they had nothing hoppy. They resolutely held out on making an IPA for absolute donkey's years, and finally they broke. And they make okay IPAs now, but yeah, you're right. They held that line for a long time.
So I think it's difficult only because it's not many breweries that so to speak, weather the storm and keep making that style of beer that they intended on, rather than just following the triple berry sour or whatever weird style. I realize that triple berry sour in 2022 is not a weird beer. It used to be.
No, it's not at all. It's only a triple berry sour. It also contains 3 different strains of lactose. Is there a tasting room if you go to Hoyne? What should people expect if they go to Victoria and want to hang out at Hoyne?
They only have a growler bar, unfortunately. They don't have a pub license or whatever the specific license type is there. So you can go in to buy merch and you can go in to buy growler fills and takeaway beer. But unfortunately, you're just going to have to find probably the nearest restaurant if you want to sit down and enjoy a pint.
Is there a particular bar that is very closely tied to Hoyne that, is generally regarded to always have the latest Hoyne releases, or?
I don't have that information on hand.
Fair enough.
They do a great job, though, of being well represented in Victoria. I'm fairly confident that you could stumble into any pub in Victoria and either find dark matter or Pilsner or both, and then probably a selection of the other stuff as well.
Cool. If you'll pardon us, we'll talk a little bit about what we have coming up next week. We are keeping the BC Love rolling here. Also, without Aaron here, these cans are suspiciously full. They are more than half full. So next week we are going to do 33 acres. Now you're probably going to say, wow, Kyle, those cans are a lot smaller than the other cans. Yes, they are. That's why this tasting is a lot cheaper. I actually had to go into the computer software and create a whole new line item for a new beer tasting at $11.95 because these beers sell for $17.95 to $16.95 a 6-pack, so I wasn't charging you $18.58 for 4 because that's madness. Profitable madness, but no. I love 33 Acres, love what they do, think the beers are really, really interesting. I've wanted to do a tasting with these folks for a while, but I've had trouble getting 4 beers in stock at the same time, and I was too lazy to create a separate item for them when I could because I'd have to do that. I really like them. I think their brewing quality is incredible. We've got a West Coast Pale, we've got an IPA, we've got a French White, we've got a California Common. These are really, really neat beers. They all come in small cans. That's why we're doing them for like 2/3 the price of normal, because you only get 2/3 as much beer. So it's going to be fun. I'm working on getting a guest from Ethos Beer Distribution. We'll see how that goes. I will put that at 50-50 because I don't know one way or the other yet whether we're getting a guest. So that is coming up. So we just spent all this time praising Hoyne for not really making IPAs, not bending to the crowd. Let's taste their IPA.
Let's taste the IPA. Yeah, this one was, it took them a long time to. I say that like they had to do it eventually, but that's not the energy that I mean it in. This one came out, I want to say, within the last year and a half. I believe is the timeline on that. Before that,
So opened in 2011, held off on IPAs to like 2020, 2021.
well, I did have an IPA in the lineup, which is the you might recall Devil's Dream IPA. I believe was their first IPA, and that was more of a West Coast inspiration.
I don't recall that actually. No.
It was in the market.
Okay. And so you said that was West Coast, and this absolutely perfectly clear beer is their hazy East Coast then?
I believe they refer to it as a juicy IPA. They don't explicitly call it a hazy IPA. They're careful about that.
That's fair. I just have it as IPA in very large letters of the paper airplane.
Yeah, so they are definitely going for that juicy IPA profile here. We've got that lighter body so that we can really bring through the flavor of the hops. They use a combination of hops that I believe includes Idaho 7, Eldorado, Azaka, and there's the German one too. Is it Mandarina or is it Ariana?
I'm familiar with Mandarina. I don't know the other actually.
Equinox, Ariana. Yeah, nailed it. Oh, and Cashmere. No Idaho 7. My apologies.
Craig's out. He's just moving to Victoria. You know what, Craig? We don't blame you. Oh, sorry. We got some... Oh, yeah. Alberta apparently opening April 1st. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. They're a great example of someone who might be kind of comparable in ideology to Hoyne.
Yeah, they
strong,
stick to their guns. No pun intended. Sorry. I realized it the second I said it. Tail gunner sticks to their guns. Da 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 da. No, they do though. They're very true to their form of like we do ESBs and we do West Coast IPAs in the old school multi style. I like Tail Gunner a lot.
Big time. Yeah, and their head brewer Blake, he has a true love for the lagers as well. He's actually, I think I was hearing he recently got back from speaking at a conference on European lagers in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's going over and telling them that like, oh, here's what you need to learn from a Canadian on European lagers,
he's doing something
that's
right.
pretty high praise to me.
Well, this tastes like a time machine right here. Like this tastes like IPAs I was drinking 15, 18 years ago. And that's not a bad thing at all. Like there is something to this, and I think it's the malt profile where the hops on this. We did a tasting about Time Warp IPAs. Oh, I don't know, 9 months ago, 10 months ago, where we redid Red Racer IPA, and it didn't taste anything like I remembered it. Purely because it wasn't. It was probably the same thing, but I had changed. If it makes sense, this tastes like how I remember Red Racer IPA tasting 5 years ago. It's a modern interpretation of what that beer was back then, in the sense it's hoppier, it's brighter, it's cleaner. All of the hop notes are better defined. It's a vastly better beer, but it reminds me in that way that time makes everything seem nicer in the past. It reminds me of those IPAs I loved before. And I don't think I can write a nicer love letter to this beer than that.
I do think this beer uses more expensive hops, generally speaking,
Oh,
than.
I'm sure they do. But don't you wreck my nostalgia, Grant. Don't you dare.
Nope, nope.
So I really like this beer, and it's made me all fighty because I really do like this style.
It's nice. It's not trying to slap you across the face with bitterness or like these outrageous flavors. It's just trying to kind of nicely present them and suggest that you have some, and then you go, you know what? That was so nice. I think I will have more.
It's a very Moorish style. I'd actually say that for everything on the table is these are very Moorish beers. Like, I could have another. You know what? I can get an Uber. It'll be fine. My car will be safe downtown
Yeah,
ish.
as I
Um,
mentioned, yeah, I think that that's something that Hoyne does extremely well across their entire lineup is bringing that consciously bringing that drinkability into their beers.
I've watched a lot of brewmaster interviews in doing a lot of these tastings over the last couple of years, and they all talk about drinkability, and then on the very next breath, it's like, so our next beer is a 12.5% triple IPA, but we really want to focus on drinkability in the brewery. I feel like Hoyne actually took that to heart and kind of stuck with it in a way that not
Absolutely.
a lot of other breweries do.
I've had the great pleasure of meeting the man himself, Mr. John Hoyne, and hearing him talk about his philosophy on the brewery, the brand, the beers, and his own background. That was a lot of B's. Sorry for the alliterations. Um, but yeah, no, he takes that to heart. He actively that's what he wants to be doing, and he does now have an outlet to a degree to make somewhat wilder beers that he calls the Young Lion series, which is where he kind of lets his brew hands loose in the brew house and concoct these things that they would not generally put on their main series of beers. But we're getting two right away, and this might be telling to the mentality of the brewery as a whole. But one of them is a straight up hazy IPA, and the other one is it's a Polit Mavi Lejak. It's a half dark lager, a Czech half dark lager.
Well, they really took the gloves off there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And well, that's just so charming, isn't it? That like
It is.
they're letting their brewers loose in the brew house, and they
Really
come
let
up.
your hair down, lads. Let's make a hazy IPA and a Czech beer no one's ever heard of before.
Yeah, it's fun. My partner is studying for the BJCP, the beer judges certification program for her national level certification, and just 2 days before we registered that SKU, we were going over the Czech amber lager is the core style, and we were going down the list of commercial examples, and you know what? There's a lot of Czech on that list that I can't pronounce. Uh, I think there's one U.S. example, and the rest are all European. And I couldn't think of a local example that I'd ever seen. And then 2 days later, lo does Hoyne come through.
I love breweries like this that find these old school styles and bring them back. I think Establishment is quite good for that.
Yep.
But that's just that's just beautiful brewing. It's creative and it's interesting and it's not always, reaching into the tickle trunk of old brewing ideas and like coming up with this weird Bavarian thing that existed 150 years ago. Some of it's just paving your own path, but oh, I love when they do these really interesting, wonderful old school styles that we just don't see. And it's so much more creative in its own way, even though they're kind of copying an old recipe. It's more creative than just, oh, we have a kettle sour. What do we want to do this year? I don't know, it was raspberry last year. Let's make it
Which fruits are we
blackberry this
put into
year.
it? Don't get me wrong. We've done very well with Strathcona Love Buzz, where
No
we
doubt.
get a new collection of fruits every month like clockwork, and it's very very tasty. It's just enjoyable in a completely different way. The Love Buzzes of the world are a little bit more hedonistic. It's just pure pleasure that you get out of drinking it, versus these are sitting down and you can enjoy them whether you're thinking about them, whether you just want to passively throw them back. They're good beers to think about or just sip on.
Yeah, and I think we'll leave it right there. I don't know if we'll do rankings tonight because I usually don't when we have a guest because I think it's insulting to the beer. But
You've done
I
it
would
with
really
me every
struggle.
time so far.
What's that?
You've done rankings with me every time so far.
Oh well, fine. Then why would we break with that tradition? And I'm really struggling with it. I think I have to put the pale first of all things. I really liked that. I liked how old-fashioned it was, and I'll put the Vienna 2. And then I'm really going to struggle on these two.
First.
What's that?
You were so sure I was going to be first.
I come in with my own preconceived notions, but I am never afraid to go back on those and say I've changed my mind. So it's going to be Pale 1, Vienna 2, Pilsner 3, and the IPA 4. I'm enjoying this, but I like the other 3 better.
I get what you mean. I never want to say which child is my favorite, but they're all well.
It's never Bart. It's always Lisa.
IPA is 4 for me. I think Down Easy, then Hoyne, Pilsner, then Vienna number 1 for me. Though actually, secret option number 5 is actually number 1 for me, and that's the Helios Lager. They're Dortmunder.
So tell me about Helios and why do I have to have it in my store?
You have to love it. You don't have to carry it in your store. Dortmunder style lager, so it stands out different as a golden lager style from the Pilsner. I just find it to be crisper and brighter. I don't think you get quite the same grain spice out of it as you kind of get a bit of that grain spice out of the Pilsner here. I couldn't nail down exactly. I've never done a side to side with Pilsner and Dortmunder from this brand, but it just speaks to me in a real way that I just latch onto.
For those suggesting my European vacation, yes, we could all go to Europe together and drink beer, and I will book us in. Just forget Europe. Let's just do Germany, and I will book in German wineries, a couple of really cool German distilleries I do know of, and then just German breweries the rest of the trip. Yes, we could absolutely do that, and that's one of the things that Aaron and I have spent some time talking about is transitioning part of the business into a fun, boozy travel biz. But that's a conversation for another day. Grant, thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for all of you for joining us. This was wonderful. This was great. This was Hoyne, and I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to Sky for doing what Aaron's never done and made this seamless and clean and pretty. Take a lesson, Aaron. But yeah, we'll see you all next week. Take care and good night.